Please help me welcome Mr. Austin Hatch.
Thank you, Eva and Alex and the whole team. This is a really inspiring event. A school that's 3 years old and has a second year just explosion of cultural beauty. It's very inspiring to me to see all that's being handed on to your students and your children and to each other. So I'll pray for all my new friends here in St. Louis and ask you to pray for me and all of that. So I didn't know that Andy had sent words, so that's funny to hear words from a student. He was, it was my 9th year of teaching, but my first year at the Heights, and he was one of, I think, 5 8th graders who ended up at Princeton. And when I came to the Heights and they were in 8th grade, I just thought all of the Heights students were just going to be like that. And the next year I found that they were not all like that. Some were much more respectful than Andy was. No, I'm just kidding. Andy was always on point. But that's right. So I'm very happy to be in the gymnasium. So I teach a lot, but I also love basketball probably too much. And so this year I kind of returned after a hiatus to coaching. I'm coaching our freshman team. It's the first time that we've had a freshman team. The school's grown a lot in the time that I've been there. And so just a quick anecdote, which actually is related to the talk. But so you make cuts, because there were 22 freshmen who tried out for the team. There's, I don't know, 70 in the freshman class. And I cut to 13. And one of my colleagues, he's a little older than I am. He's from Boston originally. 13. Like you got to cut to 12. You can't have 13. And I wanted there to be 14 or 15. Like, I had these kids in mind who you got to be tougher than that. So, well, I'm withholding his name because it's being recorded. But I called him by name. Like, it's real easy to play 8. But even, 9 through 12, they're not going to get that much playing time. And he comes up real close. You're building a community of love. You keep him on the team, you play him. You find 2 minutes where he's not going to hurt anybody, and you play him. Everybody plays. So my only response, like, that could possibly be right, was, will you be my assistant? And so he agreed once he realized I was serious, and so he's a fabulous assistant. And so far we've played 5 games and everybody's played. And we've won them all, but that doesn't matter, right? That's good fortune. But this community of love, right? Everything that Zena said, I'm just gonna try to live up to that precedent here. And then the inspiring, I've had the good fortune, because I do teach at the Heights, and the Heights is kind of a great place. So sometimes you get asked to speak about things because you're associated with this thing. And as Father said at Mass, once they've gone through the big names, you're there. And but you can also feel like, ooh, do I have another talk in me? But then Eva with the Ad Fontes, Sources of Living Authority, and then just this is the theme, and it's still in dialogue, but it's loosely, like, wow, I had never thought about that. So everything kind of becomes new when you're given a really rich theme, which may be a little bit of what Zena's talking about with the great books. So I'm going to use some of the phrases that were described to me about the theme of where I should try to go with the talk. So vivifying the sources, right? Bringing life to the sources. And the authority, thinking about the authority of the teacher, the authority in the spiritual and intellectual growth of the child. And I'm already intimidated by the immersion groups, right? Those speakers It's going to be fabulous. We've got, right, Montessori represented, Augustine's represented, Beowulf is represented. It's a greatest hits list here, but it's all very beautiful. So then the etymology, the Auctoritas from augere, to grow, to increase, to originate, to promote, all of those things captured in the image of the gardener. It's fabulous, fabulous image. And then at least in English, the ambiguity of the phrase, living authority. So the authority is alive, when I have to live the authority, I have to embody the authority. And so this idea of gaining deeper respect from the students and from the parents. So that's what I'm going to try to talk about in like daily life. How do you try to do these things? Obviously, as Zena said, it's got to suit you. So you and I are different. Our schools are different. The ages of the students are different. But I'll try to use some diverse examples. One great book author, whom I didn't read at St. John's, maybe Zena teaches him at St. John's, but I missed him and I didn't get them all. And that is Cicero in the De Officiis, which we read senior year. One of the classes I teach is called The History of Western Thought. It's kind of a great book C class. And we go from Plato to Newman and Benedict XVI, and then back to Plato, right? The kind of introduction of each of those. In the some of my students, I do have two students who are of Andy's caliber, and they do have the Greek next to the English. I have no Greek, but I'll ask them, right? Mr. Andrews, what is it they do? Well, that's prepon, and okay, and how do you say that? Yeah, okay. And he explained, that's very decorous. So, but Cicero describes the virtues as the fonts, right, from which the moral life is formed. So this sense of we're going to the sources, and this opening of the De Officiis, and maybe I'll make reference to De Amicitia as well, as the source of our authority, is what I want to think about, these sources. Now, in the Oxford English Dictionary, authority includes the right or power to enforce obedience. So when it said right, I thought of Cicero, because our rights come from our duties. We have a right to worship God because we have a duty to worship God. You can't keep me from doing that which is my nature to do, at least not in an illicit way. You could try to keep me from doing that. So the power, but then enforcing obedience, this is a very interesting word, enforce, and I'm much more along the lines of what I understand to be Zena's presentation is, I've got to attract obedience. I can't really enforce obedience. Then it's not obedience if I'm using force. So I'm respecting this being who's in front of me with his own interior life. But the second definition is that it's a delegated power. And so that's my first entry point. That as teachers, we're standing in place for the parents. And so we've already entered into a relationship before the student comes in the room with the parents. And so even though they are not the ones we see every day, they should be the first ones that we think about in our relationship and our authority. Okay. Yes.
Is there a way to aim the mic up or up towards you?
Aim the mic up
Or maybe, do you mind holding it? Silent?
or hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or be shorter. Watched the tape of myself once, and I was bending down like this in my glasses. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Couldn't hear me before? Everything I just said was brilliant. So thinking of the parents, well, let me back to Cicero for a second. So book 1, De Officiis, if you haven't read it, please start a reading group and work your way through. It's fabulous. If you don't have time, then read De Amicitia, it's shorter. If you don't have time, then read Plutarch's How to Tell a Friend from a Flatterer. It's even shorter. If you don't have time for that, talk to Alex about cultivating leisure in your life. And cut something out. So Cicero observes a mind well molded by nature, so a virtuous mind, right? A daring mind, a magnanimous mind, a courageous mind, will not accept rule from anyone unless he or she perceives that it is just, that it is for the good. So this is your trick. You have to convince the little children that the rules are for the good. The best way to do this, our man Cicero suggests, is be good, right? Because then it's easy to seem good, or easier. It's not always easy, but it's easier. So to teach from authority, you have to become good. Then the children they'll be naturally attracted to you and accompany you on the adventure. Okay, so the partnership that we're first in, right, is with the parents. And so getting to know them is very worthwhile. So this school in its third year has 60-some students. I don't know how many students are here. But when I was at Western Academy in the first years, and that school I think now is almost 17, 18 years old. This is in Houston, Texas. There were 50 students. And so maybe there were 30-some families. And you could really know everyone. And it was a beautiful time at that school. My first teaching job in my career was at a Christian Brothers school in Washington, D.C., St. John's College High School. And there were 800 students in the high school. And I was 22 to 28 years old. And I hid from all of them, right? Because they were all older than I was, and I didn't know who they were. I really enjoyed teaching, but I hadn't had that sense that these are the people that I'm really in league with, conspiring for the good of these students. So it's worth getting to know them, and then it varies. I don't know how big your school is or how often you can meet, but back to school night's very important. Parent socials are very important. Parent-teacher conferences are very important, where you can get to know their name, and then encounter the child in the context of the family, because that's where they exist. They're not dropped into the woods raised by wolves very often. Makes for great storytelling. But if they've made it to your classroom, somebody's caring for them. And so you need to see that your relationship with the child really only exists in the relationship with the family. So try to be social. And then some kind of nuts and bolts things. One guide at the Heights we have is, get back to a parent within 24 hours. If you get an email, make sure you get back quickly. Get a voicemail, get back quickly. And then get to face-to-face, or at least phone conversations. Because some of the gentleman asked the question about, post-Edenic life. So sometimes children fight, or sometimes somebody eats somebody else's lunch, and it's good to get to the facts, and then quickly, right, get ahead of the misperceptions that might be out there. So face-to-face conversations with parents, phone call conversations, rather than, if you're on paragraph 3 of the email, you should stop and pick up the phone. This isn't gonna go well. And we all know it's hard to read tone in an email, but your care for the child and the parent's care for the child, and both of you know the child well enough that it's possible the child has done something wrong or failed to do something, right? Because the parents know that the socks are still behind the bedroom door. So it's not actually impossible for them to think that the child may not have studied for the quiz, which was announced a week before, whatever. But so get to those face-to-face conversations. I'm going to steal 2 tips that I always give to my freshman parents. So at the Heights, I teach freshman core literature and history to freshmen. We go from Augustus Caesar to Napoleon and read literature that's set within that same setting. But I'm also the boys' mentor, so we meet once a month just to talk about spiritual, intellectual, physical, moral formation. Like, what are your goals? How's it going? That kind of thing. And early, you meet with the parents. And so I always cover a few topics with my freshman parents. And one of them, well, the first two I'll tell you, are stolen from Jim Stenson. So this is another plug for another book. So maybe you know Jim Stenson. He's written parent leadership books and different things. I heard him speak in Houston, and he gave me some advice. So the first thing I tell parents, parenting is difficult and important. Good job, right? But parents need encouragement. So maybe you're a young teacher, and these parents are almost old enough to be your parents, right? You can still encourage them, right? Even though you don't really know what it's like to parent. And but you may have some insight into their child because you are spending time with that child, and they don't get to see that child in that dynamic. So you still have something to say at a parent-teacher conference. But it is also wise to take notes as a young teacher at a parent-teacher conference, because as Zena says, you may end up a parent, and you can learn a lot from parents. I learn a lot about parenting from freshmen in high school who tell me about their parents, and they have really good parents, and then I go home and my wife says, I've been telling you that for years. And now we're gonna do it because this freshman, sorry dear, but you were right. So one thing, give encouragement to parents. And then second, Jim Stenson says, parents tend to think of short-term goals, and they have to be invited to long-term goals. College is a short-term goal. It's quickly in the rearview mirror, and I have 2 college graduates amongst my 7 children, and my youngest is 9, who has expressed no interest in college, right? It's cost him 2 of his dear friends, right? Because they went away, and whatever. But long-term goals. So sometimes it's fun in a parent conference or in a mentoring meeting just to raise the sights from the quarter grade or whatever's going on in the year, and beyond the college application. So those seniors, that first half of the year, they're all writing for college applications, and they're worried about these things and excited about these things. To what kind of grandfather is your son gonna be, right? And is there anything we can do this week that would help him to become that man? Maybe this storytelling exercise has practical applications after all, right? Because he's going to be able to mesmerize 37 grandkids so that the parents of those children can actually talk to each other uninterrupted for a little while, right? And the people at today's conference have figured out how to do this. It's probably because the children are unattended, which is good for them because they are free beings, so they can just somewhere in the snow, more or less close to the chapel, which is good. So give parents encouragement, invite them to long-term goals. Obviously, heaven's a long-term goal, but still, something a little short of that is helpful. And then practical conversations with parents, since you are in this conspiracy and you do see, you see here you've got 18 of this age group, and maybe you've seen many years of them, and maybe I'm just telling you things you already know, and you're being very kind. But in any case, with my freshmen, the phone is a great pitfall, right? So helping parents, maybe freeing parents from the service to the phone or the screens or the gaming. These are common obstacles. Sometimes parents need to know, he's not the only one who got a phone. In fact, 75% of the students don't have phones, and another 5% lost them and haven't told you yet, right? I don't know where it is, but the phone, it's a great tool. I have one. I would like it to be an older one, but my wife said no, it has to not have a cord. That's a thing nowadays. But so they're fabulous tools. Cars are also fabulous tools. Voting is a very important power. We reserve voting for 18. driving for, I don't know, 14, 16, whatever the age is. So a child with a phone at 10 or 12 or 13, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, this is a bad idea, right? You don't drop your kid off at the mall and just say, I want you to go into every store without any restrictions and all by yourself. You could waste a lot of time that way, and I'm sure Project Gutenberg has all of the great books online. However, everything else is online. So it's at least a waste of time, and then at some point, middle school or high school, it can also be a gateway to all kinds of images that have no business in a child's mind and are deformative and can be addictive. And so it's good in a parent conversation just to say that, you know, this is just part of the lay of the land. So all of the filters in the world don't necessarily serve as well as the phones are charged in a common space right here in the kitchen or in mom and dad's room, and everything is shut down. This is one of my favorite dialogues to have with freshmen in mentoring. So do you have a phone? I do, right? Is it your phone? Yeah. What do you mean by that? Right. Did you buy the phone? Well, no, my parents gave it to me for, you know, this, whatever. Oh, okay. Do you pitch in for the monthly plan? No? You don't do that? Oh. Do you charge it every day? Not in your room, that's right, yeah. Do you help with the electricity? No? And you said it's not in your room. Are you saying that you have a room? Okay, yeah, you share it with a sibling, great, okay. But you have your own bed? And clothes. You come to school every day, clothes. And the groceries, you are such a freeloader, and you call this thing yours? This is your phone? This is your parents' phone. It's their plan, it's everything else. What do your parents think this is for? Well, it's, you know, if I miss the bus, I'm supposed to call them. So why do you have it when you're doing your homework? You're already at home, right? So anyway, parents like that at a you know, back to school night, little dialogue act, and but it can also help them to see, like, yeah, take the thing away. You're doing a favor, right? Because the thing can be a big obstacle, and your child's spouse, who, if they're, you know, 12 years old, and most of them are going to get married, even if some of them are going to be given a special vocation to celibacy. That means that their spouse is already born somewhere, probably. Maybe they'll marry somebody, you know, 15 years younger. It's just not that common, but it happens. So that person deserves no rivals, right, in your child's mind, right? The fidelity of that marriage can begin in the purity and goodness of this child's imagination and life. So that's my take away the phones. Take away the screens. One of my colleagues, he helps parents by, you can make me the fall guy, right? You're going to take the phone away and destroy it, right? It's never coming back. It's not like, if your grades come back up, then we'll give you this thing that's bad for you again, right? No, just take it. Just blame me, right? You can say, Mr. Babendreyer really, we think he's crazy, but we're going to give it a try, because this seems to be a difficulty. Or you can use my name, Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch said. Okay, so you and the parents are after the good of the child, and the parents, now they may need to be reassured that you are, as a teacher, that you are seeking your child's good, because at times you will definitely seem like you are trying to ruin the child's life. At least that's the way the child will feel, and then that's the report that will go home. So you have to reveal that you want them to do well, and that's what you're trying to do. And so let's shift now to the students, right? How do I win the trust of the students? One more coaching anecdote. I was at a coaches conference, and two speakers spoke back to back, and the one was a men's basketball coach, and he's had some success in kind of the mid-range of men's college basketball, and the other was a women's college basketball coach he's clearly in the top 4 of it's the women's coach at Louisville, and just very contrasting styles to these very specific, very, very successful characters. And the one guy, he's this is related to the subject of authority. I know this seems like I'm just rambling. This is what it's like to be in my classroom. But the one guy's about dominating the will of the opponent. And my staff and we first modeled this by dominating the will of the players, right? And we tried to see who of them can dominate. And I remember taking notes and then just stopping. It's just like, I just want to know who he coached for, who he played for that did him wrong. Like, this is not attractive. And the next guy, it was the most beautiful and indirect public correction, right, so that I had ever seen. Or it was an accident, I don't know. But he took the microphone and tipped his hat because his team had used a play that he saw the previous speaker's team use to win a game, right? And so he said, I just want to thank you for that. And if you guys tape end of game situations with your DVR or whatever the latest technology was, it's always good. You can find something new. So, and then his talk was just filled, like he knew the names of the high school volunteers who were the demonstrators and treated them in just exactly the way that Zena talked about. Like he expected that they were going to be interested, attentive, do their best, and if they didn't do the right thing, it was because they didn't understand. And then he was going to apologize, explain it better, and then they were going to continue. So that was indirect, right? You just saw him do that, treated the demonstrators in a different way. But then what he talked about with his players is they have to know you love them. And so you have to talk about stuff and spend time with them. And you won't tell them in the same way that you tell your children that you love them, right? It'll be indirect, but you will sacrifice time for them, things like that. So if you're a young teacher, it's January, so you probably already figured out everybody's name in the room. However, this is really important in practicing your authority. You need to know everybody's name in the room. And so that's the first thing we do, whether it's a basketball camp and there's 40 little fourth graders, right? I'm going to learn everybody's name and they're going to learn everybody's name. And so we're not just going to clap at each other when it's time to pass or say, hey kid, or like nobody's going to be anonymous in the room because we're going to bear witness to the dignity of this person. And then they know each other and they do behave differently, right? This is especially true of young men in a parking lot, right? They do behave differently when they know that you know who they are. Or when you want to call a classroom to attention, if you're just able to say, that young man, Simon, could you get your buddies over there to quiet down so that we can begin? Works a lot better than the anonymous, let's all quiet down, right? Well, he must be talking to someone else, right? That pronoun is not clearly defined. So learn their names, it's worth the time. This is a way you naturally practice authority. And then you also learn who they are. They're boys and they're girls. They're from the Hatch family. They're from the Perez-Benzo family. They're all finding out tonight whether they got into UVA or not. They're all facing the apologetics exam tomorrow. This one has a cold. That one is back for the first time since 6 days absence, which started with a funeral and then turned into the cold that the other one caught. Right, so that they're moving in time. They're not the same as they were last month, right? But you're attending to who they are today. They're choleric. They're phlegmatic. They're, right, and if you haven't read Father Houck's Four Temperaments, I think every coach and every teacher should do that, right? 'Cause, my wife has homeschooled all of our children for different, none of them have the same contract, you know, everybody had different years before they went to school and which school they went to and came back. But she's fabulous, and just have that strong first reaction. How could anybody reply in this way, right? Or how could you not? And then you read that book and you go, we're different. Yeah, there's bushes and trees and not so bushy bushes. That's great. Okay. So see those individuals, and you know, I had the good fortune. There's much written about gender and boys and girls and different settings and things. So I taught in a co-ed school, high school, and then I was at an all-boys school at the Heights, and then another all-boys school at Western Academy, then back to the Heights all-boys school, and then I was part-time in the afternoon in a co-ed setting again, right, for the first time in a long time. And I found myself saying, if I could just get these boys to sit down, right, which I didn't think in the all-boys setting for the last 18 years, but here when you put this 13-year-old boy in the room, and it's not so much just one of them, it is 8 or 10, and then these young ladies are just ready to talk about the Odyssey, yes, because that's what we're doing right now, right? And this guy is, so you might take a walk, you might play a game, right? But everything needs kind of to be tempered with humor, right? Because the competition has to have the right tone and everything. But there's lots of things like that. Okay, so cultivating authority, and I'm trying to be mindful of the time. And the next point on my talk notes is be punctual, right? So be punctual. You can tell I'm frequently late or overtime. And so my administrator, Mike Moynihan, right, this is entirely fictional. This is what I imagine happened in his mind. I have no evidence to suggest that this actually happened. But recently we changed the schedule where my third period class is followed by Mass, right? Because maybe Hatch will respect the Lord. Because he's certainly not going to end on time for lunch or Mr. Hernandez's calculus class. So anyway, it's something I'm working on. As Zena said, fear and trembling, right? It's about you, so you got to model punctuality, so you got to end on time. And then making things meaningful. So 8th grade boys, I think every human being, but 8th grade boys and seniors in high school definitely, they don't want to play the grade game. Like if I do this, then I get that. They don't want to play that, right? Some of them, they're like, I want a job where the thing I do is paid, and then I can do meaningful things with that. And that's good and noble. So then crafting work that you're going to do that leads them towards things that actually matter, and helping them to see that that's what you're doing, this is a great way to kind of improve your gardening skills, if you will. So when we recite poetry, right, which we do pretty frequently, you got to memorize and recite this poem. I remind them that someday they may want to memorize something really beautiful, because they're only going to propose once, or maybe not. Maybe they're going to have to propose a few times, but they, you can revise and get better, right? So you build that into your instruction. And you can write, and you can revise for extra credit, or you can recite, and you can make an appointment to revise. You're gonna give a toast at your brother's wedding, or you're gonna eulogize your father. These are very practical, real things that you're preparing for when you're doing, this recitation of a Hopkins poem or something like that. Okay, in being punctual, thinking about time, try to make whatever you're responsible for. Maybe you're the administrator who's responsible for everyone's schedule, right? And I've been able to do that at 2 different schools. That's a lot of fun. I'm serious, it is. Like, you're like, and then we'll all do this because, as Alex said, because the tyrant said so, right? But you're in charge, whatever you're in charge of, do think about the rhythms of the plants, right? Think about, right, there's seasons that I guess they all help the plants to grow, or I guess maybe it's depending on which plant we're talking about. But the seasons, what can you give to your class the priority to really important things? Maybe you have many things to do. You're a homeroom teacher and you're doing language arts, which means you're teaching them everything that the upper school people can take for granted, right? And they will never come down and thank you, right? They'll just complain about the comma splices or something. But can you give time to poetry? Can you give time to writing in class, in silence? Can you give time to conversation? You have the authority to do that. You're planning at least your class period, right? And at most, if you're the administrator, can you give time to the Mass? The first school I taught at, Mass was available. It was at 7 a.m. So if you were a freshman and you were going to get to that Mass, that really depended upon commuting, which was outside of your control in many people's cases, right? And if you were the young teacher that I was, you just lacked the virtue to get there, right? And then the school day started. And then at a couple other schools where the Mass is somewhere within the day, and either everybody goes, or you can choose to go, or you can do this other good thing like silent reading. You get that exercise of freedom, but you make it possible for people to get to the Mass. Or maybe you're teaching religion and you have a chance to model and coach, if you will, visiting the chapel, right? Just kind of living in reality. Here's our best friend. Here's the most important person that we could visit in the day. And then we're going to go back. When you cut in silence, especially if this is something you're doing for the first time, I love to have them write. So, Friday's test day, this Friday, it's going to be a recitation, but, well, yesterday we didn't have school, but Thursday we had the test day. So they were reciting the opening of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, just so they could think about April, right? Because in DC, we don't have snow anymore, apparently, so everybody's depressed. There's no 2-hour delays. There's no snow days. It's just school, more school, short days. But anyway, in the silence, if you're going to work on a poem, so since we're doing the Canterbury Tales, we've got a Canterbury Tales storytelling contest. So each guy put in $1, so that's $18. Winner take all. 100 lines of iambic pentameter rhyming couplets telling us some story. The plot doesn't have to be original. Chaucer's plots were not original. Shakespeare's plots, not original. But the poetry has to be yours. No machines are allowed. And so on a kind of defensive level, as you're working on authority, a practical thing you can do, write in class. It's defensive in the sense that you're not going to get an AI-generated 100 lines of iambic pentameter, which the computers can do, right? At least as well as a novice freshman who's relatively uninspired by the muse, right? But if they've got time in class, they may use that time to try to write poetry to win this prize. Now, when the silence begins, if they're like my students, they are naturally allergic to the silence. And so they will have to ask you a question. Don't go for the bait, right? Like he's not serious. The silence begins now. Sir, I have a question. Don't answer. Don't answer. Walk over. What is your question? Do you want us to begin writing now? Yes, I do. And then the next one, you mime, whatever. But they'll settle in, and then you'll have a few minutes of success where they're silent. And even if they're not writing that poem, maybe they're contemplating some deep truth of reality or catching up on sleep. But you can visit them, and I think this is another aspect. There are many different teaching settings, right? There's the Montessori classroom, which I'm a big fan of, but I'm not trained in. There's the seminar classroom, which I have some of the, I used to think I did seminar all the time, but I don't. So now it's specific days where we all sit in this setting, and I try to just be another inquirer, whereas most of the time I'm kind of Socrates. I get half the lines, and I've kind of got a plan. Like I'm riffing off what whoever it is, Polymarchus, Thrasymachus is saying, but yeah. So have that sense of using that time, creating that thing, rhythm of the days. And another rhythm to pay attention to is the liturgical calendar and the seasons, right? And I don't know if you're the administrator or you're the teacher, there are different things you can do that are natural outpourings. It's kind of like the Symposium. So this is annual, so now that kind of tells you when you have to start, I guess tomorrow, or maybe you take the Lord's Day off, right? It's Monday. But the poetry contest, or at our school here at Chesterton, you have the White Horse, the competition, the White Horse Cup? Yeah. So we have the competition of the tower, and the clans, we call them the Red Cross, the Gold Cross, the White Lily, and the Red Rose. The best is the Red Cross, that's my family. It's a big controversy because you're placed by clan according to family, right? So all my sons are Red Cross, 2 alumni, 2 current students. But my daughter married a man who graduated from my school, but he's in the White Lily. And so my grandson is in Andy Perez Benzo's clan, right? It's a great tragedy and has prompted much analysis of primogeniture. In what sense is our Lord in the house of David? Does it come through Joseph's line, Mary's line? Shouldn't Arthur be free to be a man fully alive and in the Red Cross? But so those festival days, they start with Mass, and it's always the Feast of the Annunciation. It's always the Feast of All Saints at our school. Mass, and then a poetry competition, right, by grade, and then lunch by clan. And then feats of strength, there's foot races and all kinds of martial games that our former military guys make up. And these are great natural pourings, making things meaningful. Now, there are certainly times when you have to explain why this is meaningful, right? Because a family says like, oh, great, that's a great day for a college visit because there's no classes. Right? Or the young man says, yeah, I don't do poetry, sir. I'm not. What? God made you a human being. You have to do poetry, even if badly, right? It's our man Chesterton here. So, but crafting meaningful work and explaining the goal, trying to discover a goal that's meaningful, right? Not just keeping them busy, but allowing them to be busy. Another aspect of punctuality, when you teach in a school and your wife is homeschooling, right? She knows, right? You guys could get this done faster, right? You don't actually have to send them home with that much homework, and now they can't eat dinner or do chores. Are you serious? Like, do you know how much I did when I had them? Like, we were done by noon, and they turned out really well. Well, you're right again, dear. So we try to limit what you send home, right? Try to get a lot of work done, and this augments your authority. I guess that's a redundant phrase now that I've learned to augment authority, whatever. Learning something new every day, because they would like to be free, right, from this assignment when they get home. So they would like to be industrious in the writing lab, if that's what literature class becomes today. And then the parents can be grateful that they have another set of hands, or they have a little more time to have dinner together, which should be a normal thing. Okay, paying attention to the little things, augments your authority and earns trust. If you're starting class with a prayer and you say, "Oh, Johnny, could you grab that piece of paper? Bill, let's organize these chairs." Top button. Well, I almost said an actual. Those guys were hypothetical characters, but I almost said an actual student's name. And he's not going to watch this video, but he never has his top button. But he ties the best double Windsor you can imagine to try to hide it from me, right? And then others will try to bait me where it's actually buttoned because they know I'm going to ask. And but they put the tie in such a way where it seems like it's not buttoned, and it's fun. It's fun. So you're earning the trust with these attentions to material order. One last thing, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe take one question.
Okay. Yeah, that is apologize, right? This doesn't diminish your authority, right? When you apologize, because then they see that you are trying to rule in a just manner, right? To guide in a just manner the classroom, and admit when you don't know. That's a brilliant question. I don't know the answer to that question. Okay, so in this way, we can work at our use of authority. So questions, or one question. Or two. Alex is approaching. Yeah.
Why don't you just spell it out and Austin repeat it? Yes, thank you so much for your talk. So I have some Gravity Middle School boys in my room, and I teach 7th grade English literature and religion. And I was wondering if you had any practical advice of like what to do classroom management wise to make them engage in the content that we're reading and discussing and writing.
Great. And this is a co-ed room? Okay. So a few things. So I think boys defer they'll open the door and let the young lady go first, especially after they've been told that that's what they ought to do, right? Even if they just knock their sister over to get out of the burning building first. But so they'll tend to defer in a conversation. So sometimes, I'll point you to a resource. Cana Academy is another group to plug into. They're the people behind the Trinity schools, Trinity at South Bend, Trinity at Meadowview, and I think they have a third campus. But they have a lot of seminar support examples when you're working to prepare students for St. John's College and Thomas Aquinas College. It's kind of collecting observations. So before the discussion begins, maybe everybody's going to find a quote that responds to the prompt that you've got and write it down. And then before the discussion begins, they all get to share that one and maybe a sentence on why. So you're kind of taking turns as the kickoff, and then they've got something, and they've already heard themselves speak. So it kind of takes away some of the I'm not going to jump in. I think so. That's one idea. But many different ideas for kicking off a conversation. Another would be that the young men really benefit from reality checks, kind of one-on-one, just very brief. They also benefit from brevity. Yeah, I can see it. My younger son's like, this needs to stop. Yeah. But just calling things what they are. So this is the discussion, and you just those same themes that Zena was talking about, right? So you know what's true here, and this, and I know you've done the reading, right? So, but we all benefit from each person's observation. So if you could just make an effort to get in early on the conversation, that would help out a lot. Things like that. But those one-on-ones are helpful when sometimes you got to address them all and coach them all at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you, Austin.